and the killing of other people. And so I did a lot of studying on this, and I wrote to various people and looking for guidance, and I interviewed various people, and I decided I would become a conscientious objector. And my father was a conscientious objector. His brother, my Uncle Newman, he was a conscientious objector, and as a matter of fact, a good bit of his second career was spent serving in a conscientious objectors camp down in Bowie, Maryland. And so my parents decided that I ought to see what this camp life was like. So my father took me down to visit my Uncle Newman in Bowie, Maryland, and it was quite an experience. It was a hard life. He was working on a farm, no pay. The only thing he got was his 3 meals a day and a place to sleep at night. It was a conscientious objectors camp. And also, the town folk became aware that this camp existed in Bowie, Maryland. And when the men, and there were, I don't know, 20 or 30 men that were in this conscientious objectors camp, when the men would go to work in the morning or come back from work in the afternoon, they would sometimes be attacked on the road by people driving cars, knowing who they were, and swerving to scare them and try to hit them with their cars. And so I saw all of this, and I said, yeah, but based on what they believe and what I was coming to believe, this was something we had to do. And so I did file with the draft board to be signed up as a conscientious objector. Jean and I were married at the time, and Jean was very good about this. She wanted to challenge me very carefully as to how sincere I was in my beliefs. And she said, Wesley, she said, suppose I said that I couldn't go along with this, that I could not support your becoming a conscientious objector. And I said, well, I guess we'd have to part our ways. I would go my way and you would go your way. Well, she obviously accepted that answer, but she backed me up after that completely. I wasn't sure she would, but she did. Her parents were not particularly pleased with my becoming a conscientious objector. They thought that that would be a blight on their family. And Jean had a younger brother, Bob, who was eligible for the draft, and he actually went into the Army, but he worked in an office down south someplace for his whole career in the Army. He was never subjected to serving in a Army capacity as a combatant. And his mother, my mother-in-law, often would say, well, Bob could never kill somebody. And the answer to that was, if he was directed to do that, he would have to do it. And she said, well, he would not do that. Well, he didn't have to do that. He served at a desk job, and her younger brother, Greg, he had some physical problems, and he got a deferment based on his physical problems. So her two brothers escaped really having to make a decision with respect to learning the ways of war. But I had to go through quite a rigmarole to be classified as a conscientious objector. One of the first things they did was to interview everybody in my neighborhood where I grew up. All my neighbors up and down the street. Interviewed each one to see if any of them saw anything that would indicate that I was not really sincere at this. And of course they didn't find anything like that. And the other thing they did, they went down to where I went to college, Duke University, and interviewed my classmates that knew me, the fraternity that I had joined, and of course they didn't learn anything down there that wasn't me, and they were satisfied that my life as a fraternity brother was consistent with my belief as becoming a conscientious objector. I went before my draft board, and I was prepared because people had told me ahead of time what my draft board was going to ask me and how to properly respond. And of course the question came up right away, well, suppose your family was attacked by someone who wanted to kill them, what would you do? And my answer was, I would do anything in my power then and there to protect my family. But I will not keep a gun in my house or any other weapon of war. But anything that's at my disposal, I would use to protect my family. And they couldn't really argue with that. They accepted that. And but the draft board still didn't know quite what to do with me. I kept applying for a conscientious objector's rating by the draft board, but they weren't willing to give that to me. Well, Jean and I waited for 3 years after we were married, before we had any children at all, waiting to see what would happen to me. And eventually, the draft board said, well, we're going to refer you to the highest level of the court in this area of our country. And we want you to see Curtis Bach, B-A-C-H, Bach. Very famous name. No, I guess it was B-O-K. Very famous name. He was a pleasant judge to talk to. He didn't jump all over me. He just asked me some general questions, which I answered and satisfied him. And he was totally convinced that I was sincere in my beliefs. And but still, the draft board would not give me the rating that I was seeking as a conscientious objector. But nothing was happening, and 3 years had gone by. And Jean and I decided that we really wanted to start having children after that period of time. So we did, and along came Becky, and then Steve, and then Susan, and then Chris. So that they eventually said that I was being deferred because of family obligations. I said that I really wanted my conscientious objector deferment, so it was on my record, but they'd said, nope, you're getting your deferment because of your family needs. So I never got what I wanted, but the end result was the same. It didn't really matter. My religion meant an awful lot to me. I have many stories that I could tell you about my experiences with being in the presence of God. And I'm hoping that some of you who may not have had those experiences will benefit from hearing my experiences and knowing that those experiences are available to you too. And you just have to be alert and recognize them when you see them. Well, good morning to my grandchildren. What I want to do this morning is to tell you some stories of experiences I've had while I was working up in the Poconos. After I took my early retirement from working with the up in North Wales, after I graduated from college.
Yeah.
My first job was with the Leeds and Northrop Company in North Wales, where I ended up being manager of a group of people that were responsible for writing directions, doing design drafting for the for various sections of our company, and also keeping records. It was really a good job. The group that I was responsible for started getting smaller and smaller. So I decided, maybe it's a good thing for me to leave the company at this point. So I was looking around for things to do, and it turned out that at Pocono Lake Preserve, the manager of Pocono Lake Preserve was also retiring, and they were looking for a new manager. So I thought, well, maybe I can apply for that job and become the new manager. And I had all the credentials. I mean, managing a large number of people, interacting with the public, technical knowledge, all this sort of thing. So I was going to be a very good match. The pay wasn't very good. The pay was significantly less than what I was making at Leeds. But Mom was working at that point. She had her own business as a counselor, counseling service. And so I talked it over with her, and she agreed that she would be willing to do this and start her own counseling service up in the Poconos. So I went to the board of directors at Pocono Lake Preserve and presented my proposal, and they accepted it. And they said that they were very pleased that I would be interested, because here I was, a preserve person who was very familiar with what was going on in the preserve, knew a lot of people on the preserve. And so the president of the board of directors at Pocono Lake Preserve was also a friend of mine. And he was very pleased that I would be willing to come in and be the new president of the general manager. Thank you. Be the new general manager at the Pocono Lake Preserve. And my reason for wanting to go there was, first of all, it's a beautiful place. Those of you who have been there, you know that. And also, I had always been interested in wildlife. And I thought this was a great opportunity for me to become a lot closer to wildlife. And also the opportunity to actually make possible the protection of a lot of the wildlife areas up there in the Poconos. So for me, it was a really good match. The pay wasn't that good, but it was enough. Mom and I could get along on that very easily. So she agreed, and I agreed, and I went to and we built a log cabin, which was the top of the line, very warm, very well insulated, electrical heating units, plus a very nice fireplace, a nice wood stove in case the power went out, and a nice garage where I could park my car, and it was just perfect. So we did this, and accepted the job and went up there, and life was great. So the first story I want to tell you is the opportunity I had to milk a live black bear. I think I got your attention on that one, because there's not that many people that have had an experience of milking a live black bear. And many have asked me, well, how did you do that? And my answer is, very carefully. So when I was up there one April morning, I got a call from a representative from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And they said that they had, the year before, put a radio collar on a female black bear so that they could locate her and find out where she was. And in this early April morning, they had located her up in our woods, hibernating under a log. And they would like to go up and run some tests on her, and would I like to go along? I said, wow, that's just what I want to do. That's why I'm here in the Poconos. I want to interact with wildlife. So we hiked up in the woods. There were two other representatives from the community that went along with me, because this was winter time and there weren't very many people on the preserve over the winter. And I went up. Jean went to work as she normally did, so she wasn't along. And we hiked up into the woods and came to this area in the woods where there was a log that had fallen down from a tree, a rather large log that had fallen down from a tree and was covering a deep hollow part in the ground. And this is where our black bear was hibernating, underneath the log, and she was sound asleep. Now, I got to back up a little bit here and tell you a little bit about the biological history of black bears up in the Poconos. Now, I learned this from the ranger who had taken me up to see this black bear. And I have no idea if it applies to any other bears in the United States or not. To the best of my knowledge, it does apply very definitely to the black bears and the Poconos. But black bears and the Poconos, mating takes place in the latter part of the summer, early fall, into the late fall, all the way up until the time that the female black bear goes into hibernation. Now, it would be not good if she gave birth to black bears, their cubs, before she went into hibernation, even though mating had taken place in the late fall. Mm-hmm. Because if the young bears were born too early, they would not survive through the winter. She could not keep them warm. They would be too big. And on the other hand, if the cubs are born too late in the winter, they will be too small by the time she wakes up, and they would not be able to keep up with her when she goes going around into the woods.
Looking for food, because she'd be hungry when she wakes up.
She'd be very hungry.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know she has cubs
right.
when she wakes up. And if they were these large cubs that were there, she wouldn't hurt them, but she would go off, running off, and they would be too small to keep up with her. So that wouldn't work out. So what nature has done, and I don't know if this applies to any other bears in the country, like the brown bears and the grizzly bears and the polar bears,